Okay, good morning everybody, and Hazak Baruch, thank you for joining us on this beautiful Thursday morning as we are studying together Perashat Toledot. And I would actually like to take you to a piece of the Perashah that often is not spoken about. We usually discuss the birth of Esav and Yaakov. We usually discuss the taking of the blessings that Yaakov took from Esav. We even sometimes talk about the wells that Yitzchak had dug. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then it's a good time to open up and study the Perashah. But today I would like to talk about 4 or 5 psukim that find themselves really in between 2 chapters that really are not so significant at face value. What I'm referring to is chapter 26, pasuk number 1. We know that Avraham Avinu, when there was a famine, what did Avraham do? Avraham's response, his reaction to famine, was that he would go down to Egypt where there was no famine, and then he would have to say that his wife was really his sister. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but actually, like father, like son. Not only did Avraham do that, Yitzchak did that. Yitzchak would tell the people that Rivka is his sister. And here's an interesting pasuk. Vayira'av ba'aretz, there was a famine in the land. Look at this, how many famines in Israel, okay? We know the Gemara says in Masechet Berachot, page 5, Eretz Yisrael niknet beyisurin. Okay, 3 things that are going to require sacrifice if you want them. The 3 are Torah, Israel, and Olam Haba. Okay, so Israel is not an easy possession. It's not an easy achievement. It's not something that's going to come without difficulty. And there's famine and more famine. So, Yitzchak goes down to Pelishtim. He's heading down to Egypt. And now God comes to him in a vision. Vayera elav Adonai, God appears to him. Vayomer al tered Mitzrayim, and he says, don't go down to Egypt. Stay here in Israel. Yitzchak was banned from leaving Eretz Yisrael. And the reason I remember hearing one time when I was younger is because Yitzchak was a korban. Yitzchak was put on the Akedah. Yitzchak is a sacrifice. Yitzchak was kadosh. He had a different level. He actually represents avodah. Avraham is chesed. Yitzchak is avodah. And he himself was a korban. And therefore, Yitzchak was banned from leaving Eretz Yisrael. God said, don't worry, stay here. And he's the only one of the Avot that never left Israel. He was born in Israel, he died in Israel, and he was in Israel in between. Avraham was born and he left many times. Yaakov left, like we're going to read at the end of the Perashah, that he goes to work for his father-in-law Lavan, where he ends up marrying his 4 wives. And Yitzchak never leaves Israel. God says, stay here. Gur ba'aretz hazot, stay here, live here, and I'll be with you, va'avarecheka, and I'll bless you. And this is where God blesses Yitzchak. It's right here. Because God says to Yitzchak, Ki lecha ulzaracha eten et kol ha'aratzot ha'el. I'll give you and your children all of these lands. And I'll establish the covenant that I had with Avraham avicha. So here, Yitzchak is being guaranteed to succeed in the blessings of his father Avraham. And I'll multiply your descendants like the stars, and I'll give them all of the lands over here. Why? Why am I blessing you, Yitzchak? If I stopped here and I asked you, everyone, why is Yitzchak being blessed? Why does he have the merit to continue in the legacy of his father? Because he was a big tzaddik, right? But it's not what it says. It says, Ekev asher shama Avraham bekoli. Because Avraham was so good to me that for his sake I'm going to bless you, his son. Sounds like in his own right, Yitzchak wasn't yet worthy of the blessings. It was only because his father was a guy named Avraham. And because Avraham was a really special guy, I'm going to bless you, Yitzchak. Seforno explains because Yitzchak at this moment in time still did not do what his father did. What was the difference? Avraham would go out and he would do what we call outreach, and he would try to bring people tachat kanfei hashechina. Yitzchak did not do that, and therefore Yitzchak didn't merit yet the blessings in his own right. It's because your father's Avraham. Okay? And I want to just today delve and hang on this pasuk and just analyze this one pasuk. What was so special about Avraham, says the pasuk? Vayishmor mishmarti. He obeyed my voice. Sorry. First, he obeyed my voice. Vayishmor mishmarti. He observed my safeguards. Mitzvotai, my commandments. Chukotai, my decrees. And Torotai, and my Torah. You know how special Avraham was? He listened to my voice. He observed my decrees. He listened to my commandments. He did my decrees. He did my Torah. And it sounds like we're saying the same thing in 5 different ways. Right? What's the difference between these 5 different things? Bekoli, mishmarti, mitzvotai, chukotai, torotai. That's the question that we're going to discuss today. What's the difference between mitzvah, chok, Torah, mishmeret? Rashi over here comes to our aid. Have no fear. Rashi is here. And Rashi says, each one's a different type of commandment. Mishmarti, mishmeret, is a gezerah. It's a decree. We have decrees. What's an example of a decree? Can anyone think of an example of a decree as a safeguard, a fence? A fence around the law. Not the law, but the fence around the law. Could someone think of a fence? A fence could be, give it a couple of seconds. There's many fences, by the way. Okay, that's a good one. Extra day of Yom Tov. 6 hours between meat and dairy. I love it. Okay, you guys are on the money. Muktzeh. Okay, not touching. There's certain things on Shabbat that you're not allowed to move, even if you don't use them, as a preventative measure. So muktzeh, I'll give you an example. Muktzeh, on Shabbat, I'm not allowed to move my microphone that I'm wearing right now. I'm not allowed to pick it up and move it. Why not? Even if I don't use, of course, to use the mic, I'm not allowed. But even to pick it up and move it, I'm not allowed. Okay? I'm not allowed to move money. I'm not allowed to move electricity, my phone. I'm not allowed to move my wallet. I'm not allowed to move my pen. These are all things that we're not allowed to move. Why? Lest we may come to use them. That's one reason. A few reasons are given for mukseh. Okay? Because we have to be able to. This is what it means, a fence, to prevent certain averot. Okay? Maybe the laws of yichud, of secluding ourselves with somebody of the opposite gender that we're not allowed to be with. That could also be a problem, even though we didn't do anything, as a fence. Okay, maybe that's the oraita, depending on some opinions. But either way, so Avraham kept even the fences, mishmarti. Okay, so now we all know what mishmeret is, right? Write it down. Mishmeret, the fences. Okay? Mitzvotai. These are the mitzvot. Rashi says, Devarim she'ilu lo nichtevu. Things, mitzvot, are the things that even if we weren't commanded, we would know through intuition to do them. So give me an example that if the Torah didn't say it, we would know on our own that we should do it. Rashi gives a 3. 2. But we'll just, if anyone here has any specific examples. Think right now of something that if Hashem didn't give it, we would know on our own to do it anyways. No, lulav, I wouldn't know on my own. If Hashem didn't tell me lulav, I wouldn't know on my own to do it. Rational, basically mitzvot are the rational. Very good, respect your parents, don't steal, don't kill. Okay, that's mitzvot. So far we got it. Mishmeret are the fences. Mitzvot are the rational commandments. Chukot are devarim sheyetzer hara ve'umot ha'olam meshivin alehem. The chukot are the illogical, not rational commandments. things that the goyim laugh at and mock us about. Very good. Sha'atnez is a good example. Why in the world do I have to check my suit? Who am I hurting if I have woolen linen in my suit? Did I hurt anyone's feelings? Did I do anything wrong? Did I commit a crime? What's the big deal? Why can't I eat this food? What does Hashem care? Right? Shatnez, kosher, right? These are all under the category of chukim. And finally, Torot is including even the Torah shebe'al pez, lehavi, all the extra laws that Hashem gave to Moshe on Har Sinai. Okay, beautiful. So here we have a very interesting pasuk. Because what the pasuk is seemingly saying is that Avraham kept the Torah. Not just part of the Torah, Avraham kept the entire Torah. Allow me to read to you Gemara Masechet Yoma. Amar Rav. Says Rav, because of the pasuk that we just read, Masechet Yoma, page 28. Kiyem Avraham Avinu kol haTorah kula. Avraham kept the entire Torah. Avraham kept what we keep today, he kept. Shene'emar, like it says, our pasuk, Ekev asher shama Avraham bekoli. Since he heard my voice, etc. So we see a pasuk that Avraham kept the Torah. Amar le Rav Shimi bar Hiya, says Rav Shimi to Rav, what's the proof? Maybe all our pasuk means is that Avraham kept commandments. Some of them. And we know Avraham definitely had commandments. Which commandments did Avraham have, by the way? Avraham for sure had Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach. He had the 7 mitzvot of Noach. We know what they are, right? 7 mitzvot. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't do avodah zarah, you can't eat a limb of a live animal, you can't bless, which means to curse, you can't bless God, and did we say all of them? Setting up court systems. Maybe also Brit Milah, very good. So who said that Avraham kept 613? Maybe Avraham kept 8, and that's what the pasuk means when it says mitzvotai, chukotai, v'torotai. And he says back, if that's the case, then it should have just said chukotai or mishmarti. What's all the extras? Mitzvotai and torotai. And therefore the Gemara concludes, according to one opinion at least, Avraham Avinu kept not only the entire Torah, afilu eruve tavshilim, even the Rabbanan of Yom Tov. We know that if a person wants to cook on Yom Tov, that falls out on a Thursday, Friday, you cannot cook from Friday Yom Tov to Shabbat. In Yom Tov mechin me Yom Tov le Shabbat. You cannot prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbat. You would need to do eruv tavshilin, which is preparing on Wednesday afternoon, an egg, piece of bread or matzah, whatever it is, and we prepare that, we put it on the side. We're initiating the cooking process on weekday, and this allows us to continue that process now on Friday, even though it's Yom Tov, for Shabbat. And the Gemara suggests over here that Avraham even went so far to keep this commandment. Not only did he keep Yom Tov, he even kept the Drabanans of Yom Tov, all the extra halachot that the rabbis added, and that's what it means, Torotai, the Torah shebichtav, and the Torah shebe'al peh. So here is the suggestion of Gemara in Masechet Yoma, that this pasuk should be literally including 613. Avraham kept 613. Okay? Interestingly, we find throughout the Torah in Bereshit, in Genesis, that Rashi explains, based on this Gemara, certain psukim. So as an example, when the angels came to Lot, and Lot insists that they come, it says he made for them matzot. Rashi says, umatzot afa Pesach haya. That day was Pesach. Avraham was keeping Pesach. Lot who grew up with Avraham, Lot kept Pesach, Lot had matzot, he gave the angels matzah. He didn't have chametz that day. Interesting. Not only that, our parasha, chapter 27, pasuk 1, Yitzchak was ready to give out the blessings. He gets old. He calls Esav and he says, I'm getting old. I don't know when I will die, and therefore, please get your utensils, your armor, your bow and arrow, and go out and hunt for me. And Rashi says, please, what's the please? Please take. Yitzchak was telling his son Esav, Haded sakincha ushchot yafe. Please make sure that you sharpen your knife well to do shechita the right way. Shelo ta'achileni nevela. I don't want to be fed from nevela. Nevela is not kosher shechita. Please make sure you feed me kosher meat. Sa-na. Please do the shechita the right way, Esav. I know that you're a hunter, and to hunt you use your arrow, and you need to take, you usually shoot it, and it's easy for you. That's why it took a long time that day for Esav to come back. How was Yaakov go get a goat? The mother prepared it. He went in. Esav still didn't come back yet. You know why? Because that day Esav, in 1 second, he gets his arrow, boom! He gets the animal in 5 seconds. But Yitzchak wanted kosher shechita that day. So Esav had to be very slow and get the animal. He couldn't shoot it with an arrow, or else it's a terefa, or else it's not kosher. And therefore, this is just two examples that we see that the Avot kept the Torah. Pesach and Shechita. And again, it's all based on our pasuk, Ekev asher shama Avraham bekoli. Again, there are opinions that explain the pasuk differently. Okay? That the Ramban even says, Al derech hapshat. The Ramban says that Mishmarti means emunah, and right? That's in Chukotai means this, and Avodah Zarah. So there's no need to really force. We're not forced. Technically, the pasuk can be explained in other ways. That the Avot kept, that the pasuk is referring to 7 mitzvot, or to other types of mitzvot of kindness and faith. But this is a Gemara in Masechet Yomah. We have to mention it, and we cannot ignore a Gemara. And we cannot ignore these commentaries that decide to explain the pasuk literally. The pasuk literally says they want to explain that Avraham kept all 613 mitzvot. Now, right away, we have a few questions. But first, before, what that means, because again, it can be understood that conceptually he kept the mitzvot. What does Pesach represent? It represents freedom. He kept that idea of freedom. Okay, that's also another opinion. But there is an easy question here. And that is as follows. Can someone think of one of the Avot that did something that violates one of the commandments? Try to think. Where do we find one of our patriarchs doing something that's against the Torah? Because now we're suggesting that they all kept the Torah. Avraham and his son Yitzchak and his son Yaakov. And yet we find that Yaakov married, very good, Yaakov married 2 sisters. Now that's not allowed. It says it in the Torah. So if Avraham kept the Torah, and we assume his son Yitzchak and his son Yaakov kept the Torah, so how come he married sisters? It's a good question. Not only that, Amram married Moshe, right? Moshe's father, Amram, he married his own aunt. Yocheved was his aunt. Look at the family tree. It was his father's sister. How is that allowed? It's not allowed. So, how come Amram violated the Torah? And by the way, Amram was one of the people that never sinned, supposedly. Yaakov married sisters. Yeah, what's going on? How come these people didn't observe the Torah like Avraham did? Again, I'm going today with the assumption that the Gemara takes it literally, that they kept the whole Torah, all 613, and if that's the case, why did Yaakov marry sisters? That is a question actually of the Ramban Nachmanides. The Ramban gives a very interesting answer, and that is, just find it inside. V'yesh l'she'ol im ken echi kim Yaakov matzeva. How could Yaakov erect mizbeach? That's also not allowed. V'nasa shte achayot. He married sisters. Actually, according to some opinions, Bilhah and Zilpah were also sisters. So he married four sisters. Okay, either way, he married sisters, Rachel and Leah. Answers the Ramban, it seems to me, Shelamad Avraham Avinu HaTorah Kula Beruach HaKodesh, that Avraham learned the entire Torah through using his Ruach HaKodesh. He knew the mitzvot through his prophecy, through divine providence, whatever it was. Ve'asak ba ubta'ameh mitzvoteha ve'sodoteha. He observed all its ideas and its secrets. Ve'shamar ota kula, and he observed the entirety. Kemi she'eno mitzveh ve'oseh. Obviously, the Ramban says he didn't have to keep the Torah. He did it willingly, kind of like women who decide to shake a lulav. Does a lady have to shake a lulav? No, she's exempt, but she can, and it's a nice thing. The Avot kept it willingly. They weren't commanded. There's an interesting question, by the way. If Avraham kept the whole Torah, why did he do a Brit Milah when he was 13? He waited till he was much older that God commanded him to do a Brit Milah, 100, 90, 99, right? Why do you wait so long to do a Brit Milah? Why didn't Avraham, if he kept the Torah, the Gemara is saying he kept it, so why didn't he do Brit Milah? And the answer, one of the answers that's given, a beautiful answer, you got to hear this, okay? I need you to pay attention to understand what I'm saying now. What's greater, if someone does a mitzvah that they have to do, or if someone does a mitzvah that they don't have to do? What's greater, when a man shakes a lulav or when a lady shakes a lulav? So, right away, immediately, some people assume that it's greater when you don't have to, because you're showing, I don't have to, and I'm doing it anyways. I'm volunteer. A volunteer is much greater than someone who's paid. But our rabbis say it's not true. Gadol metzuveh ve'oseh. It's greater when you have to and you do it than when you don't have to and you do it. Why? Because once you're commanded and you have to, you now have a responsibility and you have a push, a yetzer hara, not to do it. Once you have to do something, you don't want to. It's human nature. Right? Tell your son today, when he comes home from school, don't open that door to that room. I guarantee you, all your son is going to want to do is open that door. You tell me I can't, now I want to. If you didn't tell him anything, he came home from school, he don't care to open the door. Once you tell me not to, once you force me, once you lock me in, once you put me in a situation that I have to do something, human nature is to want to disobey. So women don't have to shake lulav. There's no, over there, yetzer hara for them to disobey. But a man who's commanded and God says, you must. That's why a lot of times you see ladies running to do commandments of men, but they're not even keeping the commandments that they themselves have to keep. Right? You see like a lot of these women at the wall. They want to wear tefillin. They want to pray with minyan. Right? But they don't even keep Shabbat. You love mitzvot so much. You're not even, you pray once on Rosh Chodesh. By the way, happy Rosh Chodesh, everyone. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh. Yeah, tonight's Rosh Chodesh. Chodesh Tov to everyone. So they're running to Rosh Chodesh, but you pray once a month on Rosh Chodesh. You don't ever pray why don't they do all the other mitzvot that they have to do? The answer is because it's hard to. Because they have to do them. There's a yetzer hara. When I don't have to, now I want to. And therefore, when Avraham does the mitzvah, he does them willingly, but it doesn't get as much reward as when he's commanded to do them. And therefore, if he were to do the Brit Milah when he was 15 or 20 or whatever, he would be under the category of not commanded. He much rather would wait till God tells him. And then he's under the category of commanded. And that's a much greater reward. That's a much greater level of performance. To do it, all the other mitzvot, you could do twice. You can't do Brit Milah twice. So if you have to do it now willingly or wait till God commands, much better to do it when you're commanded to do it. Okay. So the question here is, why did he marry sisters? Yaakov answers the Ramban. Since the Avot only kept it optional, it wasn't mandatory. So it was only this is his theory, and he writes this often throughout his book, that it was only in Eretz Israel that he observed the Torah. All of the Avot observe the Torah, and that is where the Torah are performed in their highest level. They're performed in Eretz Israel. When they're out of Israel, they didn't have to keep the Torah. They didn't even, if they wanted to, they could have, but there was no requirement. It wasn't even, they didn't even feel it was necessary. And so Yaakov decides that it's okay for him to marry sisters outside of Eretz Israel. Very interestingly and very scary. If this is all true, we realize that when Yaakov comes back to Eretz Israel, what happens the second he steps foot in Israel? His wife Rachel dies. So they kept the Torah in Israel. So much so that once you enter Israel, you can't be married to sisters anymore. And Rachel passes away. Again, this is all continuing along these lines, that Yaakov kept the Torah. And the answer that we're suggesting right now from the Ramban is that he kept it, but it was optional. And therefore, they only optionally did it willingly in Israel. Outside, there's no problem. Okay, there is an interesting question here based on the Midrash. The Midrash tells us that Yosef kept Shabbat in Egypt. When he was growing up in Egypt and he finally had a family, he kept Shabbat. The pasuk says, Utboach tebach vehachen. We'll read about that in a few weeks from now. But the word vehachen, from the word hachana, vehechinu et asher yaviu. The word vehachen refers to Shabbat. We have to prepare for Shabbat. So Yosef kept the Torah even though he didn't live in Israel. He's in Egypt. This is a question that the Ramban asks on himself. According to what I just said, that outside of Israel they didn't observe. So why did Yosef observe Shabbat? Answers the Ramban, Shabbat is an exception. Yosef is an exception. What is Shabbat about? It's preserving Judaism. It's preserving the faith. Yosef knew that if he wants to raise his children in a healthy way, in a religious way, he must make sure that he observes the Shabbat. He didn't have to, but this was over here about staying connected to God. If you're in Egypt and you're by yourself and you have no Jewish support system, there's no one around you, there's no shul, you're in a desert, you're in Egypt, there's no one around that's going to be observant, no one here to help you. Yosef realized that this is a matter of life and death, spiritual life and death, and he has to keep Shabbat. It's a matter of preserving the identity of his children and himself. Okay, this is the end of the Ramban. Nachmanides. There is a question though that Rav Bernstein asks based on a very, very, very famous Chazal that we're going to read in 2 weeks from now. In 2 weeks, Yaakov is going to come back from Haran. He's going to come back from Aleppo. He's going to cross paths with his brother Esav. And what does he say to his brother? Im Lavan Garti. I lived with Lavan and I didn't learn from his bad ways. And our rabbis notice that the word Garti, write it out, Gimel, Reish, Tav, Yud, is the same letters as the word Tariag, Taf, Reish, Yud, Gimel. Garti Vetariag mitzvot shamarti, says Yaakov to his brother Esav, I lived with Lavan and I kept the entire Torah. How much of the Torah? Tariag, 613. And this is a very interesting question now because the Ramban taught us that Yaakov married sisters. And outside of Israel, he didn't have to keep the Torah. So how could he say, Taryag mitzvot shamarti? How could he say that I kept the whole Torah if you didn't? A, you married sisters, and B, you didn't need to because you're living outside of Israel. And the answer, unbelievable. Something very, very interesting. What does the word garti mean? Anyone know lagur? In Hebrew, today actually means one thing, but in biblical Hebrew meant something else. Today, you ask someone, gar, where do you live? But gar in the Tanakh actually was referring to a temporary residence. Avraham says to the people of Hebron when he was purchasing the Me'arat HaMachpelah, Ger v'toshav anuchi machem. I am a ger and a toshav. Toshav is a resident. A ger is a stranger. Temporary residence. Garti is temporary. Yaakov never planned on living in Haran permanently. He was always there on condition and in the mindset of Garti. I'm here temporarily. I know one day I'm going back. And if that's the case, it's beautiful. That's why Taryag mitzvot shamarti. He kept the Torah because he knew that one day he's going back to Israel. And so just as a way of preparing himself, preparing for his return to Eretz Yisrael, to make sure that he doesn't, sometimes when you don't use a muscle, person, God forbid, has surgery, they break a bone, and they don't move that part of the body for months, they need to go through physical therapy because the body forgot how to move, how to use that limb. Sounds silly, right? What do you mean? Just walk. But the body doesn't know how. It needs to be trained again to use that muscle. When the muscle remains dormant for a long time, it needs to be awakened. So Yaakov kept the Torah, but really just as a preparation so that when he goes back into Eretz Yisrael, he'll be able to do it again. Rabotai, I just want to close and share with you a very, very powerful idea. And it's based on the question of how did Avraham, how did the Avot, how did they know what were the mitzvot of the Taryag? If they didn't have the Torah yet, how did they know? So again, stealing, you want to tell me it's logical. Fine, don't steal. Right? All the logical ones I understand. But how do you know to keep matzah? Eruv tafshilin. How do you know that? It is not commanded. And by definition, a chok is something that only God could tell you. If God didn't tell you, you wouldn't know it. So how are the Avot able to keep the Torah? So I saw something over here. Unbelievable. The Talmud tells us, and this is actually in Mesilat Yesharim. This is in Mesilat Yesharim. Mesilat Yesharim tells us, based on the Gemara that we just quoted today, 28b, Yomah, that the Avot kept the Torah. We can ask, if the Torah hadn't been revealed yet, how did they know what the mitzvot were in order to keep them? And Rav Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev gives an amazing explanation. As people, we have natural cravings. Yes? Think of a craving that you have every day. Natural. You get hungry. You get thirsty. You get tired. What do you do when you're thirsty? What do you do? When you're thirsty, you get a drink, you get a bottle of water, and you drink, right? I'm gonna demonstrate. Okay, I was a little thirsty, sorry. When you're hungry, what do? You eat. When you're tired, what do? You go lay down. Did anyone have to teach you how to take care of your craving of hunger? Anyone have to teach you what to do when you're tired? No one have to teach us, right? We know intuitively what to do. Right? Yeah, ice cream. Definitely. Love ice cream. Okay? We know what to do. We know how to eat. We know how to drink. We know how to sleep. You have to know, similarly, the neshama has cravings. Did you know that? The neshama has cravings. The neshama naturally wants to go back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just like a person wants to eat, a person wants to drink, the body has cravings, the soul of a person has cravings. The soul wants to connect to God. The soul wants to do mitzvot. The soul wants to do chesed. The soul wants to pray. You say, Rabbi, I don't feel those cravings. I don't feel them. How come I don't feel, the need to pray like I feel the need to eat? It's a very good question. The answer is that even the physical cravings, right, even hunger and thirst and fatigue, sometimes, God forbid, there are diseases that people have that could interfere with their appetite. Yeah? We have a very big gift that God gave us that we're hungry. We have a big gift that God gave us that we get full. Yeah? Imagine a person never felt pain. They wouldn't know that they're touching this boiling hot plate, and their hand would eventually, they would lose they would get burned. So the nerves that, hot, or sharp, that means don't keep going down, because if you keep going down, you're going to stick your hand into this sharp knife and you're going to cut your hand off. So all of the feelings that we have, the cravings that we have, they're very big blessings from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? But God forbid, sometimes people have sicknesses that they don't have cravings. And it's very scary, actually. People don't have an appetite to eat. Sometimes people need to go to therapists that will tell them you have to eat even though you're not hungry. A person's pregnant and they're very nauseous and they're not hungry. The doctor may tell them, listen, you're very low, you need IV, you need to eat, but I'm not hungry, I'm not in the mood to eat. It's irrelevant. You're sick. Naturally, you should be in the mood to eat. You're very hungry right now. Because of what you're going through right now, you're very sick. You don't feel an appetite. But I'm telling you, you need to eat, like it or not, want to or not. Yeah? So too, sometimes a person can be spiritually sick. And just like a person who's physically sick doesn't feel desire to eat, they have no appetite. When a person is spiritually sick, they don't have an appetite to do mitzvah. What could be a reason that a person is spiritually sick? A person may do averot. We have to know that just like when we eat things that are not healthy, it could mess up our appetite. When we do things that are not healthy spiritually, it messes with our spiritual appetite. When we do averot, we no longer have that craving. The neshama, which naturally wants to get close to Hashem, is no longer able to do so because of all of the averot that we do. Again, naturally, the neshama knows exactly what it needs to do, what it needs to eat, how it's supposed to accomplish, how to get its nutrition. But if we do things to harm our spiritual appetite, the averot that we do prevent us. And so the Torah, I want you to know, this book right here, okay? This Torah, this is the doctor telling you, I know you're not hungry, I know that you're not in the mood, but trust me, pray. Trust me, keep Shabbat. Trust me, do chesed. Trust me, learn Torah. You need vitamin C. You need calcium. You need vitamin D. You need this thing. You need that thing. The Torah says these are 613 things that you need, and I'm the doctor telling you, because unfortunately, we sometimes lose our appetite because we sin and we cause our neshama to no longer know what it needs to do. But let me tell you something, and this is a big secret. If a person was yashar, if a person never sinned, if a person stayed on the path, if a person didn't mess up their appetite spiritually, then the neshama knows on its own what to do. The neshama would know the 613 through intuition. Unfortunately, we mess it up because of our averot. So we need the Torah to tell us what the 613 are. But if we were so good, if we were straight, then we wouldn't need the Torah. We would know the neshama, just like the body knows hungry, sleep, tired, thirsty, the neshama knows 6:13. But because we mess it up, because we do certain things, so we need the Torah to tell us. The pasuk, matter of fact, says that the Torah, this is in Shlomo HaMelech's book Kohelet, God made man yashar. God made man straight. And man deviated from being yashar because of his many calculations. That means we were all born yashar. We were all born straight. Hashem created us on the right path with the correct cravings for the neshama. But we started doing and we started calculating and we started messing it up. And therefore we need Torah. So coming back to the Avot, how did Avraham know what to do if he didn't have a Torah? The answer is the exact opposite. Avraham didn't need the Torah because he was so yashar that through intuition he knew exactly what he needed to do. We need the Torah because we're no longer yashar. But the Avot, and that's why they're called yesharim. That's why they're called the straight ones. And therefore, it was very easy for them to know exactly what the neshama needed, exactly how to connect to Hashem, exactly how to do the mitzvot, exactly which mitzvot, eruv tavshilin, pesach, matzot, lulav, whatever you want. They knew which nutrients their body, their soul needed to get close to Hashem. We should always be zocheh to remain yashar, to remain on the path, to be able to give our neshama all of the nutrition that she truly, truly needs. We'll stop over here. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.